So I just wanted to do maybe 20 minutes on some super basic ECG reading stuff. I don't know where in the process you are, but maybe this will be a review if you've already kind of gone over it. So, you know, they teach you 6 questions that you need to answer in order to determine the strip. And I add number 7 because if it's a sinus rhythm, but they have no pulse, it doesn't mean anything, right? So I add the 7th one. But let's just walk through this list real quick. The first question you need to know is it regular or irregular? When we march out those R waves, the R to R, I'll switch over to a slide real quick. So here's our R waves, our QRS complex, the R waves sticking up. If we take our calipers and we put them right on the tips of those R waves, the points there, we should be able to slide it right across and they'll all line up. And when I was learning, I didn't have calipers. I just used a piece of paper. But that one is regular. And here's an example of one that is not regular. So if it's not within a couple of little squares, like, oh, look at this one, it's definitely off, then it is not regular. So this one's irregular. Now, why do you need to know that first before you need to know rate? Because if it is regular, the most accurate way to count rate is the little block method, the 1500. That's where you count these blocks. In this case, let's see, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, looks like 30. And 1500 divided by 30 would be 50. So that would be the most accurate method. But if it was an irregular rhythm, then you do have to do the 6-second method where you're just counting the R waves for 6 seconds. And if you can see at the bottom of this, it's got second markers. So the rate on this one, we can't do the little block method. We just have to count the R waves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the rate's 80. So that's why you need to know whether it's regular or irregular first, is because you have to determine which method you're going to use to determine rate. And then method 2 is what's the rate? And I know you guys have gone over it several times. There's 3 methods doing it. There's, we count the R waves, the 6-second method, little block, big block. The little block's most accurate, but you got to use the 6-second method if it's irregular. The next question, is there a P for every QRS complex? This is important. There's 3 zones of the heart that can generate an impulse. It's either atrial, it's going to be junctional, or ventricular. So if there's not a P wave for the QRSs, then it cannot be a sinus rhythm or an atrial rhythm. There's a super easy, basic way to learn rhythms, and that is, in this case, if there is a P wave that's associated with that QRS complex, it's atrial in origin. If it's a nice little speed bump, that means it's a sinus rhythm. But if it's a weird looking P wave, then it's going to be an atrial rhythm. If there is no P wave, then you look at the width of the QRS. If it's nice and tight, it comes from the junction. And if it's wide and bizarre, then it comes from the ventricles. So you can look at a lot of rhythms and just look at this one and say, oh, look here, this top one here, it does not have a P wave. So it cannot be atrial or sinus in origin. So we look at that QRS. Is it nice and tight or is it wide and bizarre? In this case, it's nice and tight. So it has to be junctional. And indeed, this is a junctional rhythm. And if we look at a rhythm and see if I got another one over here. I guess the only one I have pulled up. We look at this rhythm, there is no P wave, so it's not atrial. And we look at the width of the QRS. If it's greater than 0.12, then it's got to be ventricular. And sure enough, this one, there is no P wave and it's a wide complex. So it's ventricular or idioventricular. So that's why we need to know, is there a P wave for every QRS? The next one is the PRI within normal limits? Well, if we know that P wave equals atrial depolarization, we know the PRI is how well that AV node is protecting the ventricles. So if it's not within normal limits, then we have some problems. It could be too fast, like in WPW, or it can be too long where you have some type of AV blocks. The next question is the QRS within normal limits. The width of that QRS tells you how well the electricity is flowing through the ventricles. So if it's really wide, this could be due to a bundle branch block, Could be due to some type of hemifascial block, and it could be some type of ventricular rhythm origin. And then the last thing is you name the rhythm. So based off of the evidence we just figured out, right? What's the rhythm? We'll say it's a sinus rhythm. And then I like to add number 7. Does this mean anything? Because I have to remind myself to treat the patient, not the monitor. Now, there are some exceptions, when with unstable rhythms like VTAC, where we're going to definitely treat that rhythm because we want to keep them out of VFib. But it doesn't mean anything. If someone's got a beautiful sinus rhythm, but there is no pulse, then PEA. So, okay, let's go through these. We've already just looked at whether it's regular or irregular, and we can apply the rules to this one. So we said the rate here, I think it was regular, and we came up with a rate of 50. Do we have a P for every QRS? Yes, 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 yes. Is the PRI within normal limits? I like to do this. I'm going to use the tip of this caliper. I like to find a QRS complex that starts right. I'm using the caliper on your left, the tip on the left there. Maybe I can ungroup this and do it a little better. Let me group these two together real quick. There we go. I'm just using the tip here. See where that QRS complex starts right on a dark line. Here's something else I can do is turn off these grids, these snappy little grids. We're still done. I need to turn off smart grid. There we go. Okay, now I can slide this thing around. So see how this QRS complex starts right on a dark line. So if I'm measuring that PRI, I know that P wave has to start right before this next dark line. I'm sorry, or after this next dark line, because that is 0.20 from here to there. So if it starts after that dark line, I know the PRI is within normal limits. So here's another one over here on the right that the QRS starts right on a dark line, and that P wave starts before the preceding. So I know my PRI is within normal limits. Is the QRS within normal limits? I just look at the width. Here's one side of it. I go back to that dark line. And 1, 2, and it's about 0.12, so that's good. So PRI is good, QRS is good. And then the last thing to say is, well, what is it? Well, this case, the rate's 50. It has a P wave, so it's sinus. This one, you could probably get away with calling it atrial, actually, but everyone's going to call this a sinus bradycardia. These P waves are a little wonky. See how this one's kind of peaked, and that one's got a little divot in it. It's more likely an atrial rhythm, not a true sinus rhythm, meaning it's not coming exactly from that sinus node. It could be coming over from Bachman's bundle or some other spot, but 99.9% of the time, unless you're speaking to some crazy nerd like myself, people are going to call this a sinus rhythm. Let's look at the next one. Same thing here. We are going to see if it's irregular. When you figure that out, the next question is, what's the rate? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 80. It's not too fast, not too slow. Do we have a P for every QRS? Nope. We don't. There's a P over here. So we can't do the PRI because the P waves are kind of crazy. And then we look at the width of the QRS. It's nice and tight, so that's good. And then the last question is, well, what is this? Well, the P waves are irregular. The R to R's are irregular. And there's a term we use called irregular is AFib. And I had a physician years ago that taught me that a tachydysrhythmia is AFib until proven otherwise. And I'll be darned if he isn't right, because the hardest ones I think to read are going to be when you're trying to determine if a rhythm is VTAC versus, say, AFib with aberrancy. And we'll talk about that, a little bit more advanced stuff, or VTAC versus a left bundle branch block, those wide complex delayed conduction in the ventricles. So those can be very difficult. All right, so this one was AFib. Let's look at this one. The first question is it regular or irregular? So we'd line these up. This is a regular rhythm. I'm using my fingers here on the screen. What's the rate? We'll find, I don't have one that lands on a dark line. That's okay. I know that's 2. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 23, 24, 25. 1,500 divided by 25. I don't know where my phone is. Oh boy. How am I surviving? The let's see, there's a calculator. Let me pull up my calculator real quick. 1,500 divided by 25. I think that's what we said. The rate is 60. So it's on the edge of too slow. The next question is, do we have a P for every QRS? We do not. They're actually negative deflected P waves, which is the hallmark of a certain rhythm. So if there's no P wave, I look at the width of the QRS. It's nice and tight. So this is a junctional rhythm. And these negative deflected P waves are a hallmark of a junctional rhythm. So we can't do the PRI because we don't have P waves. So the last thing is, what is it? Well, this is a junctional rhythm. Does it mean anything? Well, what's the patient's mental status, blood pressure, respiratory distress, altered mental status? Are they sweating bullets? If their blood pressure is 130/80 and their skin's warm or dry, color good, and they got a good mentation, then it really doesn't mean much, right? Because they're perfusing just fine with that rate. We already did this AFib one on the bottom. Let's see, just to go back through and hit these, the 3 zones again. This top zone here is called atrial. And of course it has the sinus node in it. And it's Bachman's bundle. There's all kind of different internodal pathways up here. If the P wave, like in this picture, looks like a nice little speed bump, then it's most likely from the SA node. So that's good. The rates, its intrinsic rate is between 60 and 100 up there. Anything faster than 100 is tacky, and anything slower than Brady or 60 is Brady. Another thing about the atrium up here, the atrial rhythms, is this is the location of irregular rhythms. So when you think of like sinus dysrhythmia, irregular sinus rhythm, when you think of AFib, those are all up here, the irregular ones. Let's see. So yeah, atrial. It's got a P wave or some positive looking bump that's associated with that QRS complex. It's atrial in origin. The next area is the junctional area, and it's just above and just below the AV node. If this impulse in the picture here, you'll notice there is no P waves at all. So once again, if you're determining where the origin of the rhythm is, first look for P waves. If there's no P waves, it's not atrial. Then you look at the width of the QRS. Nice and tight, it's junctional. Wide and bizarre, ventricular. So in this picture, there is no P waves. So it cannot be atrial or sinus. So we look at the width of the QRS. This is a junctional rhythm. Look at the rate here. Let's see, 300, 150, 175. So let's make it even more accurate. Let's, what did I do with my phone? I bet I left it out in the ambulance. Can you believe it? Let's see, 5, 10, 15, 20. So 19. So let me pull up my calculator again. 1,500 divided by 19 is 78.9. So 79. So in this case, it's greater than its intrinsic rate, which would be what, 40 to 60. It's 79. So because it's higher than its intrinsic rate, this is an accelerated junctional rhythm. If it gets up above 100, we call it a junctional tachycardia. Another interesting point about this AV node is if this impulse here, if it starts above the AV node and that zone 1 or higher, that impulse will rapidly go away from lead 2, while the one that's going down gets hung up in the AV node, the impulse. So you will have a negative deflected P wave if it's from the top of the AV node. In this case, you'll notice there is no P wave. So it actually starts below the AV node and goes straight down through the ventricles. So this one here is starting around the bundle of his, that north end, that higher end of the bundle of his. And this is also important to know because if you have, in this case, no P wave activity, then this one starts below the AV node and it will not be affected by atropine because it doesn't have those parasympathetic receptor sites. Well, if you got one that's got negative deflected P waves, it's from the top end, above the SA node, I'm sorry, the AV node, and those have parasympathetic receptor sites. So if you have say some type of slow junctional rhythm and the rates, you want to run a Brady dysrhythmia algorithm, the first thing is atropine. Well, atropine will work on those, but it won't work on this one. So here's a good example right here. Let's look. I think we've already done this rate was 50. That's what the rate was. So let's say this is our patient and they are symptomatic. So they maybe they're diaphoretic. Maybe they have some altered mental status, some confusion or shortness of breath. Their heart rate's only 50 and their blood pressure is, in the tank, so to speak. Will atropine work on this junctional rhythm? Well, in this case, most likely yes, because it's coming from above, just above that AV node or at the top end where there is parasympathetic receptor sites. So we can block those with atropine. It's an anticholinergic. It blocks the parasympathetic and it speeds the conduction velocity up here. Yeah, so it might just speed it up. I would give it a shot. Okay, I don't know what we're talking about here. Okay, and then here's one. So I just want to make sure I read through these. No P waves, I got that. Yeah, we did this. For ventricular rhythms, or as we call it, idioventricular, there's going to be no P waves, and the QRS is wider than 0.12. They are generally, and same with junctional rhythms, they're generally speaking very regular rhythms. Now, until you get into VFib or polymorphic VTAC, they're pretty regular rhythms. They once they get above their intrinsic rate of 20, we would call it accelerated idioventricular rhythm, or AIVR. And then there's a little bit of, depends on what reference material you use, but I think 120 is usually the acceptable rate to start calling it VTAC. So if you see a rate of 120, it's usually called VTAC, but I have seen some reference material where it referenced anything over 100 as VTAC. And then one of them I saw was anything over 150 was VTAC. So know your reference material. And then once you get really high, like 240 or 300, it would not be unheard of to call it ventricular flutter. But most of the time, 99.9% of the time, you're just going to hear VTAC. Also, just so you're aware, if you have a 3-beat run or a 4-beat run or anything greater than 3 complexes stacked on with each other, that's called a run of VTAC, or sometimes you'll hear people call it a salvo of VTAC. So sometimes patients will throw an R on T PVC, and you'll learn what that is, and then they'll go into a 3 to 5 beat run of VTAC. And it's just enough to scare you to death. Like, oh my God, the patient's going into VTAC, and then they come out of it and you're like, whoa, oh my God, I gotta do something about that. So yeah. Let's see what's next. So we'll just do a couple of these real quick. And I know I went fast on these, but go back and watch it again, or maybe it didn't make sense, or does. Is this one regular or irregular? So I'm just going to use my fingers on the screen. This is a regular rhythm. So what's the rate? I'm going to use the big block method because I'm leading. 300, 150, 100, 75. So it's a little bit greater than 75. Let's use the small block method. Who cares? That's the most accurate way to do it. So 5, 10, 15, 18, 19. So 1500 divided by 19. I need a calculator button on my thing. I feel like we've already done this one. 1500 divided by 19 is like 79. Yep, 79. So that's good. I got a good rate. Is there a P wave for every QRS? Yes. And I know if I have P waves, this is a sinus or atrial rhythm, but this is a nice little speed bump, so it's sinus. Is my PRI within normal limits? Looking for one that falls right on. I read that. I don't have one, but it is about 1, 2, 3. It's about 4, so 0.16. So that's good. PRI. The QRS is nice and tight. That's good. What's the rhythm? This is a sinus rhythm. Does it mean anything? We're going to check a pulse, check a blood pressure, ask the patient how their day's going. Is this one regular or irregular? This is a regular rhythm. What's the rate? Let's see. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So 1,500 divided by 40. I got to pull my calculator up every time. It's going to be slow. 1,500 divided by, as they say in Sumter, 40. 37.5. So 37.38. It's pretty slow. Is there a P for every QRS? Yes, 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 yes. Is the PRI within normal limits? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. 0.16. Yes. What's the rhythm? Oh, QRS is nice and tight. Forgot that. What's the rhythm? This is a sinus bradycardia. Doesn't mean anything. I don't know. Maybe this person is a ultra marathon runner or something and has a normal resting heart rate of 37. Depends on the patient. If it is symptomatic, we're going to have the doc eating. So atropine, TCP, dopamine, and well, we don't do anything else, but we can do those. Is this one regular or irregular? That's regular. What's the rate? Let's see, 5, 10, looks like a 12. 1,500 divided by 12, it's going to be fast. Let's see, we'll do the big block method. 300, 150, so ooh, close to 150. So 1,500 divided by 12. We'll say it's fast. We'll say it's 130, just to throw it out there. Is there a P for every QRS? Yes, 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 yes. That's good. So this is some type of a sinus rhythm, right? Sinus tachycardia. Is the PRI within normal limits? Yes, it's good. Is the QRS within normal limits? Yes, it is. What's the rhythm? Sinus tachycardia doesn't mean anything. Check a pulse, check a blood pressure, ask the patient how they're doing. Maybe this patient is in pain. Maybe that's why anytime you have someone in sinus tach, you want to find the underlying cause. Maybe this patient has a fever and they're hypermetabolic. Maybe they're septic. I don't know. Does it mean anything? I need a patient. Let's see, is this one regular? Or, oh, this is a funny one because on the video I did with the PowerPoints, when we were doing the rate, I was like, oh, we're not going to use that method, but this is the strip and I didn't realize it was irregular. So this one's irregular, so we count the R waves, not the small block method. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Almost 70. So currently the rate's 60. Is there a P for every QRS? I see P, 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 P. That looks weird. P, P. So anytime I see something that looks weird, right, I'm doing pattern recognition. I literally just block it. I take my finger, a piece of paper, and now I'm looking P for every QRS. Yes. So I can call my underlying rhythm. So I say, okay, I don't look at the bad stuff. I only look at the good stuff. The underlying rhythm here is a sinus rhythm. To get more accurate on, let's see, 5, 10, 15, 20, 23, 24. So let me pull up my calculator. Calculator. I think I said it was 24. I need to pin that to my start menu. 15 divided by 24. 62.5. So this is not a sinus bradycardia, it's a sinus rhythm. Let me see if I can, how do you pin it to your start menu? I know. Okay, so it's a sinus rhythm. And then after I call the underlying rhythm, then I literally spread those pieces of paper out and I block off the good stuff and I only look at the bad stuff. And when I'm looking at the bad stuff for the ectopy, the FLBs, funky little beats, or funny little beats, I look for a P wave. If it's a P wave, it's atrial in origin. If there's no P wave, I look at the width of the QRS. If it's nice and tight, it's junctional. If it's wide, bizarre, it's ventricular. This one has a P wave. So this is atrial. So then I have to ask myself, well, did this come early or late? And the only way to do that is to get a pair of these calipers back out, and we're going to measure this sinus rhythm. And this was early. See how this is our normal R to R? This happened before the next one should happen, so we call it premature. So this is a sinus rhythm with a premature atrial complex. We would check a pulse to see if they have a pulse that corresponds with that. If it was late, like for example, let's say, I wonder if I can draw on this. Let me try drawing on this. Let's say that one's missing. So just act like that don't even exist. So if I'm now measuring, we'll just act like that gap is there. So I'm measuring, oh, what's that weird beat? I block everything off that slider. So sinus rhythm with a, oh no, look, it happened late. And if it's late, it's an escape. This is a sinus rhythm with a atrial escape complex. Or, you know what would be more accurate? It would be called a sinus. We wouldn't call it that. So what we'd say is if it's missing one complex, because these are going to start lining back up, is we would probably say it's an escape. I mean, you could say it's an escape. I'm not saying it's not right. It would be more accurate to say, though, this is a sinus rhythm with a sinus pause. So it took a sinus pause. If it's missing one complex, it's a pause. If it's missing more than one complex, then it's a sinus arrest. So let me draw this thing again. Let me do that. Let me draw another annotation. I didn't mean to go over these, but I mean, might as well go over it. Oops, that's not what I'm looking for. There we go. We'll say we're missing two complexes, and this line just keeps on going. Let's see, draw. It just, oh, that's not the right one. Yeah. Oh, Jesus, that's crazy looking to you. I'm trying so hard to draw a straight line. So in this case, we'd say, okay, well, this is a sinus rhythm. And literally where those messed up spots are, I just put my hand. Let me look at it. Sinus rhythm, and this would be a sinus arrest, because we have a pause that's greater than two missing complexes. So anyway, I'm going to stop it here and just go back through and watch some stuff and let me know what you think. Let me know if I'm wasting my time making these. Maybe I am. Heck, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm talking about most of the time. Bye.